Again, finding the instructions for paper number 1. If you go under modules, it'll be assignment sheet 1. So I'm going to go over this with you all. Assignment number 1 is a literacy narrative. So if you've never written a literacy narrative, or if you're confused about the word literacy, think about the word narrative. We've all written narratives before, right? What do narratives do? They tell a story, they have characters, they have people, they have themes, sometimes they have lessons, they're organized and they're structured. Sometimes they're not always structured really straightforward, but they have a lot going on to them when we start to think about them. A literacy narrative is just that. It's the same type of story that we hear in a narrative, in a book, in a movie, except for it is about literacy. So the requirements are listed as followed. Now, I always tell students with my papers, the requirements are the minimum here. So these are the things you have to do in the paper. You'll notice that it says at least 1,000 words. Say you write 500, right? If the minimum requirement is 1,000 words, are you going to pass this essay? You are not, right? If you write 700 words and you're supposed to write 1,000 words, again, are you going to pass this essay? Possibly, depending on how well those 700 words are written. I tell my students to make sure that you hit the minimum requirements, okay? Beyond that, let's start talking about what is literacy. So I'm going to read here. According to the Educational Department Center, it refers to the ability to manipulate any set of codes and conventions, whether it is the words of a language, the symbols in a mathematical system, the images posted to the internet, to live healthy and productive lives. So literacy is the ability to, read, write, interact with these different symbols and codes and conventions. When we hear the word literacy, we often think very traditional in reading and writing, writing pen to paper or typing or reading, words on a page. But actually, this means so much more. So what this dense quote means is that literacy is a term used to describe more than just reading and writing aptitude. It is a term that refers to the acquisition of any type of communication, expression, or skill. The slang that we share with our friends and the stories we repeat in our families are all part of what sustains our relationships. Playing music, composing a scrapbook page, playing the World of Warcraft, or writing a poem all require a certain type of literacy that we had to acquire in order to do these things well. So how does this topic fit into a narrative? Well, if we think back on a certain skill, communicative practice, or reading and writing in general, there are a slew of memories to draw from. So again, that's the goal of this paper, is to start thinking about these things, thinking about how you acquired a skill or learned a communicative practice, or again, it could be about reading and writing in general, but it could be about learning how to play a musical instrument. How did you acquire the literacy here in terms of learning how to play a musical instrument? Consider your feelings about these things. Why do you feel that way? Did you have a wonderful or an awful experience in English class? Is your relationship with books tied to your family? Can you remember the first time you were inspired? So for this paper, you will hone in on these key moments, the one that clearly illustrate a change or an influence that set you on a path or sparked the enthusiasm. Again, this is a narrative. Your chosen moment memory should be original and specific, and your perspective should be detailed, developed, and analytical. So in other words, don't provide a museum tour of great high school English class or a bird's eye view of your elementary schooling just for the sake of narrating it. assignment by assignment or year by year. We don't need your whole life story. Instead, we really want you to put a microscope on this one event. So investigate something narrow and unique, memorizing prayers and catechism, reading cereal boxes at breakfast, saying a provocative word or slogan among friends. And explain this narrow and unique thing and investigate its role in your development as a writer, reader, or musician, or its connection to your membership in any group, including family and organization, or even a generation, race, or social class. In concocting this narrative, you'll provide your audience with clear imagery and details. Again, I can't stress how much this is a narrative. Use literary elements of plot, character, and setting to bring these stories to life. You may also have the option to include dialogue if this helps convey your story's purpose to the audience. I often tell students in this paper the idea is to show, not to tell. So instead of just saying, this happened to me, and this happened to me, and this happened to me, right? It's one thing to say that I walked home, and it was a really hard walk home. It's another thing to narrate your walk home up the side of a mountain on a rainy day, etc., etc., etc. So those things do different things for audience. One is more about just telling the facts, and the other one is about showing and making your audience feel and really solidify, what you're trying to tell your audience in descriptive detail. So you're going to be evaluated on these following things. I want to make sure that you have a good introduction that's engagingly and effectively introduces the theme of your literacy narrative. Again, this isn't a flyover, this isn't a museum tour, this isn't a play-by-play. This is a honing in on one specific or a couple of specific memories that really think if your theme is fuzzy, right? You want to make sure that this theme is clear. You're going to provide your audience with clear imagery and detail, so I'm making sure that you show your story instead of telling it. The structure of the narrative is cohesive and guides readers through your story easily. That doesn't mean it needs to be start to finish. This is what happened first and this is what happened last. However, if you choose to do something kind of funky and different, it still needs to flow and guide your audience from one point to the next. And then finally, editing, proofreading, to make sure there's no or few grammatical errors. So that is the literacy narrative in a nutshell, and what I'm asking you to do for paper number 1. In our discussions, you'll be looking at example literacy narratives from, famous and semi-famous people to get really good examples of literacy narratives. So as you guys are leading discussion questions, you all might want to think about how these function as literacy narratives and what kind of different elements they have and how these stories are working, and isn't it cool that this person did this? How might we do this in our projects, okay? So I'm looking forward to reading these. Again, check syllabus for due dates of rough draft,